This is a Newslaundry podcast and you're listening to NL Hafta.
अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to the 300th episode of Hafta. I can't imagine we started this 300 weeks ago and we haven't missed a single week, which is why we say अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते, no matter what. So congratulations, dear team. It's wonderful to
Congratulations to all of us.
So Anil, who has recorded most of them, thank you Anil. He's recording this from office.
Yes.
And thank you Lipi and Aditya. You are, I think, the third and fourth producers respectively of the Hafta. And thank you for your wonderful production, which often sometimes also is not so wonderful, but that is for another day. But then even the panels are often unprepared. Now, before I move on to introducing the panel and where we all are, I'd just like to point out to the subscribers and listeners of our Haftas and others, our readers of our website, कि News Laundry की नई website like मोदी जी अच्छे दिन promise होता रहता है, कभी आते नहीं है. Well, 2 days ago we launched a new website. I'm sure many of you have seen it. It has incorporated many recommendations that have come from you, dear listeners and subscribers. We sent the beta version, test version to many of you. You gave your inputs. Many of those inputs have been already incorporated. Some more are being incorporated. In fact, one of our subscribers who is visually impaired has recommended how we can make it better for people, with visual, who are inhibited visually to be able to use the website. We'll be doing that as well. So finally, we have launched, and based on the feedback we received from you over the next 2 or 3 months, the app will also be launched. So it is not Modi ji's अच्छे दिन. हमारी website actually आ गई है. So let me introduce the panel. We have in the office Raman Kirpal and Manisha Pande.
Hello.
Hi.
Joining us from Chennai is Jayashree.
Hello.
Joining us from Patna is Anand.
Hello.
And on the 300th episode, I am recording from home in case you're wondering why. 3 days ago, our accounts team member, Kamlesh, tested COVID positive. And on that day, I was sitting with him much of the day and signing checks and stuff. So therefore, our team has requested me not to come to office and stay away, although I think it's a bad excuse to keep me away from office.
Although you was trying to give it to us.
Sorry?
Why is it a bad excuse? We just don't want to get it from you.
But I'm feeling fine.
You could be asymptomatic and
Okay,
carrying
so anyway,
it.
I'll get tested day after tomorrow and then I can come to office. But I wish this had happened before I had signed the checks. Then you'd tell me to come to office.
That's true. That is true.
Then we would have made you come.
कोई बात नहीं, होता रहता है कोरोना तो check sign कर दो.
Check sign कर दो.
So that is why I'm not in office today. Otherwise, I would have loved to be in office and record it with everybody on the 300th episode. But on the 5th day, I shall get myself tested and hopefully I shall be back in office. Meanwhile, Kamlesh is doing well and hopefully he should be back in office soon. Manisha, let's have the headlines. And then I have few more announcements about the new website and what all we'll be doing. I'll tell you that after the headlines.
So, the headlines of the week. Centre throws open JNK for land sale. Gupkar parties term it a huge betrayal. So basically in Kashmir, now urban land and immovable property in Jammu and Kashmir, not just Kashmir, can be purchased by residents of any state. Facebook's senior executive Anki Das has quit days after parliamentary panel questioning. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has predicted GDP to be negative or near zero in current fiscal. We knew this, right? I mean, we've had this announcement before also. I don't know why.
Yeah, it was predicted by others. I don't think she
admitted to it.
Other agencies had said so.
In the third edition of 2+2 dialogue, India-US ink a military pact and set stage for expanding collaboration. Our External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and Defense Minister Rajnath Singh held talks with the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper. And both were assisted by top military and security officials. A very gruesome murder captured on camera made news 2 days ago. A 21-year-old woman was shot dead outside Faridabad College. Both accused have been arrested. CBI charge sheet details 6 hours of inhuman torture in the case of Jayaraj and Benik's case. This was in Tamil Nadu in June. Male government employees who are single parents can now take childcare leave. Delhi High Court has suspended 3-year jail term of former Union Minister of State for Coal, Dilip Ray, in the coal scam. Pending salaries of Delhi doctors were paid after mass leave and strike was called off last night. The High Court has monitored a CBI probe into the Hathras case. The victim's family will get CRPF cover. This is the Supreme Court order. Children could be spreaders or super spreaders of COVID-19, say ICMR. So one more reason to not have children. One dead, over 24 injured in firing, stone pelting during Durga idol immersion in Bihar's Munger. This has captured a lot of headlines across television channels and news. I think Anand can tell us a bit about what exactly happened here. There have been calls.
We'll discuss in some detail. There are many conspiracy theories going around.
There's been calls to suspend Lipi Singh, who's the superintendent of police there. She's been compared with General Dyer and all that. I mean, Chirag Paswan took pot shots at Nitish's government for this. Uttarakhand CM Trivendra Singh Rawat has moved Supreme Court as the High Court in Nainital has ordered a CBI probe into corruption charges against him. It's a very interesting case. We could discuss this a bit, maybe just give a bit of details on this. In completely unprecedented, this is when we can at least say like RSS and Navika, unprecedented, never ever seen. 4 channels apologized after an NBSA order directed them to do so. Aaj Tak, Zee News and India TV apologized for their insensitive coverage on Sushant Singh Rajput's death. Aaj Tak Do apologized a day later. We can claim impact because we send them questions asking them, why didn't you apologize? And that evening they apologized. So NL impact. And Times Now has apologized for derogatory remarks that they passed in 2018 against Sanjukta Basu, who's an activist, I think, and they called her Hindu hater and all that. She took them to NBSA and NBSA said that this was unfair and you must apologize for it. Even they apologized. So never ever have channels before apologized. So this is the first. 8 dead and 110 injured in blast at a religious school in Peshawar. Wave of new COVID-19 cases hit across US and Europe as winter looms. Delhi's also recorded its highest single-day spike with 5,673 new cases on Wednesday. We're recording this podcast on a Thursday. Smriti Irani has tested positive for COVID, and Pope Francis supports same-sex unions.
But yeah, we'll discuss in a little more detail. There may be some nuance to that. But yeah, it's a big announcement.
There's also been some international headlines with France, where Turkey has condemned the Macron government for supporting cartoons and the cartoonists, and basically saying that his utterances after the beheading have been Islamophobic, and France has said that no matter what, we will stand up for liberal values. That's created quite a lot of division in the world.
I'm not sure that's government versus government. It seems more like Erdogan saying that this man is mentally sick and he needs help. It's more about...
And Imran Khan also said that we will boycott French products and we should boycott France and all that. He also
it's a news-packed week. We'll start with Bihar because we missed Anand last week and there were several letters about Bihar, etc. But like I said, we hope you like our new website and our new podcast player. We have built an entirely new podcast player based on much of the feedback that we got from you, dear subscribers. So I'm going to list out the things that I have been instructed to say by Chitranshu, our product lead, regarding the new website and the podcast player. You know, the website is up. Thank you for your feedback and those who pitched in. And when we had no developer, by the way, there was a time when we didn't have a web developer. That time the website was kept stable by many volunteer subscribers, guys. So you should know Newslaundry is truly a collaborative effort. So many of you had chipped in and were solving up problems and making sure those glitches go away. Now we have a better payment flow with Stripe and PayPal and the gift subscription feature. So all of you who used to write to me saying, यार मैं subscribe तो कर लेता लेकिन तुम्हारा payment gateway बड़ा भद्दा है. बेटा अब वो excuse अपने pocket में रखो और credit card निकालो क्योंकि अपना payment gateway अब झकास मक्खन के माफिक चलता है. Then the podcast player we have worked on majorly. You can check it out. We have several features that you wanted. Do give in feedback. We'll keep improving it because it includes all the features that matter to likes. It has download. It has speed control. You can queue it up. You can skip to specific topics within an episode. There is a feature where we have about the podcast, what is being discussed where, and you click on that and you go to directly that segment. And we are still making a few changes. So do give feedback. You can write into us at contact@newslaundry.com or write to me directly at abhinandansekhri@gmail.com. Your feedback is going to be shared with the developers so we can keep improving on it. And regarding the paywall, I know I had said that as soon as new website goes up, we'll pull it behind the paywall. Well, we won't. It'll continue to be free for 2 more weeks. Why will it be free for 2 more weeks? Because we want to give you enough time to try it out, get accustomed to the new features, to the new player, and then we put it behind the paywall. We had initially made login mandatory, but to ensure that everyone can use it without any friction, we've removed the mandatory login. Once Hafta goes behind the paywall, which probably will be another 2 weeks, you will need to log in so that we can know you're a subscriber. So this is the 2 weeks that you can share it with all the people you want to share it with. All the stuff that you said that you have many people, but it's a really crappy experience. share our podcast with them, share our website with them, because in 2 or 3 weeks, we'll pull it behind the paywall. So we just have these 2 weeks to try to get as many people as we can to get hooked onto the Hafta. On that note, we record this at 12 noon on Thursday, 29th of October. So let's start with Anand. Hi, Anand. You're there? Have I put you to sleep with my boring announcements?
No, I am here still.
I can try again, though. You'll be surprised at how boring I can be. Do not underestimate my boredom. But it's very exciting watching the Bihar campaign on air. I've seen Modi's speeches. He seems a little more annoyed than usual. He very rarely smiles unless he's with white people abroad. But the rallies are packed, whether it is his rallies, whether it is, I read that Nitish rallies are not well attended or people are saying boo-boo, but at least on the video, it seems packed. Tejashwi's rallies seem packed. So are you and your brethren not worried about COVID? And also, what does this mean? And apparently the turnout was very good yesterday, right?
Yes. Yesterday's rally was at historic Gandhi Maidan in Patna. It was well attended. COVID in Bihar, the mortality rate is below 1. It is 0.49. So also the recovery rate is among the second best in India. In fact, one of the underreported stories has been about how little COVID has affected Bihar. So I think the polling percentage in the first phase was around 54.9 compared to 2015 assembly elections. It was just there. In fact, it can better it because some late adjustment of data and election commission does. So it can even better it. It is better than the Lok Sabha elections of 2019. So far from COVID discouraging voters, it has encouraged more to come out. So that is the COVID part. The second part is rallies. See, Nitish has never been a very crowd puller with his oratorical skills. He's a more of an administrative managerial kind of politician. Does not go in flourishes big and talking big. So right from his student activism days, he has not been a crowd puller with his speeches, rallies, and this. So, in fact, during his chief ministerial tenure, some of his MLAs and MPs attract more crowd than him. So that is not a big surprise. Also, one point people need to understand is that in Bihar, only 2 parties have cadres, and that is BJP and RJD, and left parties. JDU, despite being 15 years in office, is not a very cadre-based party. It does not have a large workforce or people very committed to coming to rallies or this. And this time, RJD has struck an alliance with left parties. Left parties, even if electorally insignificant in Bihar, have a very huge cadre in Bihar, and if they come out for some, say, julus or something, the streets of Patna are filled with thousands of rallies, marchers, and
that one of the most famous political murders was of Shahabuddin killing a CPIM leader, right?
Yeah, Chandrasekhar, a student leader in Siwan. He was a JNU student. He had come to Siwan, his home district, to try his political luck, and Shahabuddin, it was alleged that Shahabuddin thought he was a threat to his growing popularity and got him eliminated. That is an allegation. Shahabuddin is in jail for a number of allegations. This is a separate case. So anyway, so that is it.
There is, so you're saying there's a sizable left kind of cadre, but whether it politically translates to vote. Now, one question I had, and after that, Manisha, I think you had a question about the Lipi Singh incident. You can also tell our audience about it before we ask Anand to shed some light. Anand, I saw Tejashwi Surya's bite during a press conference. I think it was during a speech where he praised Chirag Paswan. I saw Modi's speech, I think yesterday before, where he pretty much said LJP is not part of NDA. He's the only leader other than, JDU leaders from the BJP who has, well, not condemned, but kind of left LJP out in the cold. Whereas other BJP leaders like Tejashwi Surya and all are kind of building up Paswan as someone of consequence. What is this? Because, there is much speculation that BJP is keeping its hedging, it's keeping its options open because this is the end of Nitish. And if Nitish doesn't perform, they will grab onto Paswan. And anyone can go with anyone. I mean, even it is not unreasonable to think that Nitish may end up going with Lalu if that turns out. Is it that unpredictable in Bihar? And also the fact that, so that is one question I would request you to take, that where is Chirag Paswan? Why is one leader praising him and one not? And the other thing, that the fact that people can chant slogans against Nitish at a Nitish rally and not get beaten up, does this show the very tolerant nature of Biharis? Because I know in many other states, you'd get beaten up. Like in Delhi, if you do slogans against Modi at Modi's rally, you'll get beaten up. In probably Punjab, the same thing would happen, whichever party you're from. Tamil Nadu, I think also you can't go to Jayalalitha rallies and say anti-Jaya slogans. You'll probably be slapped around.
Yeah,
but with Nitish's rally, you can still hang out. Is that the tolerant nature of our Bihari brethren?
No, tolerant not, but limits of political party. Bihar is a violent society. यहाँ सभी नेता ही हैं. So even if say a political party has its leader speaking and someone shouts slogans against him, there is also an apprehension that he has a backing of people of his villagers who may be around, and or some other local dabang or strong man. So this somehow I think nullifies the reaction, the very, very prompt reaction of the party cadre. Because where you are speaking, what is the belt, who are the influential people where you are speaking, that also counts, that weighs on how political parties and their leaders or cadre surrounding the platform from which the speech is being delivered. So this all counts. So there are pockets. Bihar is divided into thousands pockets of influence. Who is influential where is very difficult to tell. So that is one thing. But you, before that, you asked too many questions. I think I would take 1 hour to.
No. Okay, just tell me a bit about the Chirag Paswan. Did you see Tejashwi Surya's press conference where he praised Chirag Paswan?
Yes, but I think that was more of a young leader camaraderie and not very serious. Tejashwi Surya is a non-entity here, so.
But too much should not be read into that.
Yes, because they are young leaders, they go to parliament together. And that kind of vibe was in what he said, and I appreciate him, and there's that. So I think it was I don't know how his party leadership took it. But there are confused signals, and there is a kind of anti-incumbency against the current government, but how strong we don't know. And if the popularity of the Prime Minister is able to nullify that in the final count, that remains to be seen in the coming weeks. So there is a very confused picture emerging, and all permutation and combinations are possible, but results can be only three: either someone wins or loses, or there is a hung assembly. So in case of hung assembly, a lot of permutations can come into play. That's correct.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask Anand, in the context of mixed signals, didn't Modi in his rally like a few days ago praise Ramvilas Paswan, and then everybody got very confused or something after that? Wasn't that also some?
Yes, but I think that was more of a not to annoy a kind of Dusad or Paswan, which is a very a subcategory of the Dalit vote, which accounts for 5% vote in the overall tally, and the Dalits together 16%. So though Paswan is not a very tall Dalit leader in Bihar, he can command a very small section of Dalit vote. That also kind of courtesy call. He didn't want to be seen as somebody very insensitive to a very immediate death of a cabinet colleague.
And also, I saw that speech. The way he worded it. My reading was he worded it like "Marte dam tak." He was with us. He supported us. He was by my side as a member of the cabinet. So, I saw that speech. The way Modi worded it, what I got from it was that he was saying that, and probably he knows that his son is trying to say that now. He was trying to say that the guy who makes this, he wasn't like discrediting Chirag, but he was saying is when this guy was around, he was by my side. So your vote, if it belongs with him, it belongs with me. I think that is how I'd interpret it, especially how he worded it, that till the time he died, he worked with me. So I think he was kind of trying to take ownership of Ramvilas Paswan rather than letting Chirag take ownership of him.
Every political party keeps its options open. So I don't see, if Tejashwi is praising, Chirag, so I can very clearly see that after the results,
We'll see
what,
how it
so how it is, if he needs Chirag, so he can go for Chirag.
Matlab,
See, it
itna
goes with the
कीमत
BJP
तो-
also. And Chirag also, Chirag is keeping his options open. He can also go with the BJP. So
भाई ये कि इतना भी मत कोसो कि बाद में प्यार ना हो पाए, है ना?
बस वही है.
How is the BJP campaigning? Like, are they kind of putting all the anti-incumbency blame on Nitish on ground,
Well,
or
they
are they
started off by doing a
together?
lot of Article 370 and all, no?
Yeah, I mean that I
I
don't
think
know
now
why.
they're talking about Ram Temple also.
I mean, I guess that is the standard thing for BJP to do, like talk about nationalism and all. And also, I think Galwan they did because it was the Bihar regiment and all. So that.
But apparently it didn't work last time, so I don't know.
I guess for state elections it wouldn't, but Anand would know better.
But another thing
But
is...
I'm curious about how BJP is campaigning. Like, are they campaigning as a team with Nitish, or is it like anti-incumbency? Nitish का गलती है, आप मोदी के नाम पे वोट दो.
No, see, two things. Elections can be a mix of tangible and non-tangibles. So tangibles, of course, the development plank, the social welfare benefits, and non-tangibles can be, say, something woven around nationalistic themes, like, say, Indo-China, Indo-Pak, or identity issues like Ram Temple. Even Chirag Paswan, now, since he is a Dalit, it's not making news. Chirag Paswan has promised a Sita temple, so a grand Sita temple, because in the Janki Kshetra, that is
Okay.
considered to be the birthplace of goddess Sita. So,
Sitamarhi.
a mix of see, Tejashwi also recognizes one thing, and I'm coming to RJD, that to say that Nitish is corrupt and Nitish has not done work would not cut ice after a point, because he is, and Biharis are not willing to believe that he's corrupt. Nitish is not corrupt, the popular perception, and he has done work, he has done development work. But what he is saying is that we have thak chuke hain. His sell-by date is there, and he is trying to infuse a kind of political freshness in his face, in his own face, that I am the fresh face of development. And now also some of the claims he is making are just figments of imagination. But despite all the rhetorics, you need to see that Bihar politics is if you go by social coalitions, is decided by OBCs. So now the latest data is not available since 1931, but OBCs by that census constitute 51% of Bihar electorate. And now upper caste around only 17%, Dalit 16%, Muslim 16.8%. So 51%. Now Nitish was able to make fresh constituencies within that OBC, non-Yadav OBCs, and he further divided into EBCs. And a section of Muslims also, Pasmandas Muslim, the lower status Muslims. Now, breaking that social coalition of Nitish is the challenge Tejashwi is counting on, plus of course, the new youthful energy of development, the fresh face and all that.
No, but is unemployment bigger issue than development this time? Is this an issue over there?
Unemployment, I think I can hardly see any state which can say that that there are a lot of jobs for us, all of us. So unemployment is a kind of channelization of youthful anger. But but people also say that he is promising 10 lakh government jobs, which is log कहते हैं हास्यास्पद है. that is ridiculous to 10 lakh गवर्नमेंट जॉब्स दे देना पहले कैबिनेट मीटिंग में, मतलब ये सब बात बनाने जैसी बात है. So, but what people are also saying that since the governance claims of RJD regime is very low, the only hope of getting more jobs is private investment and a lot of companies coming. And the governance claim and law and order claims of RJD are so tainted that in long-term jobs, even if jobs are to be created, it has to be created in a government which has which has a better claim on governance, law and order and this. So I think apart from a sizable youthful voters who may be carried away by this, also he has done some work with that Sarkari Naukri. He has said, I will raise the upper age limit of students appearing for civil services, the state civil services, BPSC, and all this. So taking the government job route to address the problem of employment is not seen as practical by many young men who analyze it. But of course, they are very catchy slogans, populist things, and if that can play a part, then of course unemployment is an issue. Sorry, I digressed from what was your question?
My question was about NDA's, BJP's campaigning, whether they are...
No, Raman sir asked something.
So Raman sir said, is
Raman
employment an issue at all? And I think you answered that. You said
Yeah,
that there's
yeah.
no state that can really claim that they have lots of jobs. So they give these carrots of government jobs, and which is probably par for the course. And there's a certain cynicism. But what happened to the Lippy Singh incident? Manisha, could you just tell our audience about that specific incident that made major headlines, and what
So
is
this
speculation around
happened
that?
on Monday in Munger, and there was a group of people who were on their way for idol immersion, Durgas. And now the police claims that there was stone pelting. Some unruly elements in that crowd pelted stones at them, and 20 policemen were injured, and so they fired at them. The crowd, or the people, obviously say that there was no provocation and they were just fired upon. An 18-year-old man has lost his life, and there was a very graphic image of his, head split open, and a lot of people were injured also. So they opened fired at basically at a crowd of people who were going for Durga immersion, and this has obviously created a lot of furor in Bihar because of the visuals of it, and also, of course, political parties have latched onto it as to
So
attack
this is being
Nitish.
seen as an aggression of Nitish Kumar against Hindu devotees.
Yeah, which
immersing
shouldn't
idol.
stick, I guess. But I'm just curious to know what exactly happened there. If Anand knows a little more than what
and
we
there
are
was
reading
some
in Delhi.
speculation that this was being pinned on a local police official called Lippy Singh, and
Lippy
they
Singh,
said
yeah.
she has some conspiracy theory that why she did this. Well, what is that all about? And is it big electorally right now?
See, means I will come to Lippy Singh. Lippy Singh factor is important in that, but the incident was almost like that only. I think the police was trying to enforce the COVID protocol that you should be at some distance while immersing the idol and this, that, and the police allegation is that the crowd was not following it, and some elements within the crowd pelted stones, and they had to resort to lathi charge and something like that, and in which a person was killed. So that is where it stands now. These kind of incidents happen in every immersion processions, whether Saraswati idols, Durga Puja. Sometimes they are communal around Hindu-Muslim, and sometimes the clashes within groups, because there are too many puja samitis and they clash them among themselves also. So the Lippy Singh factor has the political angle here, because Lippy Singh is the daughter of Nitish Kumar's right hand, RCP Singh. Now, people don't know, but
And what is her designation? What is her post?
She is superintendent of police. She is an IPS officer. She is not there because of her CPC. She is an IPS officer, but of Bihar cadre, and she has been posted in Munger for a long time. RCP Singh was an IAS officer of UP cadre. He worked with Nitish when Nitish was railway minister in Vajpayee government, and they worked very well. He is from his own caste, Kurmi. He's a Avadhiya Kurmi, and he brought him to Bihar cadre, and they grew very close while working together, and he resigned from the IAS and became his principal secretary, later Rajya Sabha MP. So Lipi Singh is his daughter, and he has there is a perception that she has been given a long hand, some police action, like Anand Singh. I am getting a bit detailed, but it is an important point. So Anand Singh is a Dabang of the say Bar region, Mokama Bar region. So he's a Bhumihar, and Nitish's erstwhile close aide, Lalan Singh, had a rivalry with him, and it is alleged that Lipi Singh was encouraged to have a police crackdown on Anand Singh to help Lalan Singh. So that's why, despite being a police officer, she is being seen as a political tool in settling intra-JDU rivalries. Not earlier he was with JDU, Anand Singh. But anyway, so since she is daughter of Nitish's close aide, there has been more blame game going on. And BJP is on a sticky wicket because BJP has been protesting against the violence in these immersion processions, and now it is in alliance with a party which has led a crackdown on the devotees. So RJD and even LJP is trying to cash on this incident.
Right. So thank you. We got lots about Bihar politics. If anybody has anything to say about Bihar, sir, Manisha, Jayashree, we can move on.
One small thing, I mean, to say that the COVID, maybe the medically didn't have much impact on Bihar, but I think so many migrants, Bihari migrants, had gone back to Bihar, and I don't know, but there is a possibility the increase in turnout of voters is because some of the migrants stayed back.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. Correct.
And also I think it had a huge economic impact, at least on the migrants, Bihari migrants.
Yeah, and usually these migrants are unable to go back home. So yeah.
What I said that the turnout was at almost similar to the turnout in previous elections. It was not significantly higher, just say 0.8 or 1% higher. So if it was because of the coming back of some migrants, it may be. But the turnout is not significantly higher. But it is important because there were apprehensions that COVID would discourage a lot of voters to come out. But people here were not having that apprehension. I think people outside Bihar who had no idea of the COVID response here were having this apprehension.
So, right. So couple of emails I'd just like to read, and then I just wanted to move on to the apology story and something that is actually related to an email we've got. So I'll just go over the emails first. This is from Harun Beg. Hi, first time writing in, loved your work, yada, yada. Manisha is the best, etc., etc. Don't want to spend too much time on the obvious. Recently came across this comic by The Ken. I'm sure you know how fantastic The Ken is, though I'm not sure if they would count as a competitor, Newslaundry. And then there is this comic Burst the Bubble. Please find the time to go through this. It offers some great insight into media industry and why it is so broken. Everyone keeps saying media is broken, but I have never seen anyone point this out before. I would love to see this discussed on Hafta. So Harun, we will discuss it. In fact, if you see at the end of that comic, 3 of the citations of where they got the information from is from Newslaundry articles or videos. In fact, I've done a talk exactly around the same lines, which is on Scoop Whoop, which you can check out. But we shall just discuss that after I've read this very interesting mail. which is from Namit Saxena. Hi all, I'm a recent subscriber to Newslaundry, though I was under the impression that I was one for the longest time. Only when I tried to access an episode on Hafta at the beginning of the lockdown and was prompted to subscribe that I realized I wasn't. Acha bachu. Amy. But I'm glad you're a subscriber now, Namit, and I hope the experience was completely friction-free with our new website. I paid the subscription fee immediately, and since I have been hooked, not just to Hafta, but podcasts in general, so thank you, NL team, for that. I was impressed by your campaign to get subscribers to sponsor subscriptions of students. It's a great idea to build a feeling of community. You should also have a campaign to get people to gift subscriptions, an option I believe you're introducing. Yes, as you've seen on your website, it's already there. You can click and gift. And not just that, you can also redeem. So if you're a student, you click on if you're a student and it'll ask you for some details and you can get subscription for free, which has been supported by someone else.
Oh my God, what perfect timing. So Diwali is in 2 weeks. Everyone should just gift away Newslaundry subscriptions.
Yes, this is the best gift of Diwali. Diya jalao aur logon ki batti, dimag ki batti bhi jalao. And we have some lovely products also, merchandise.
Perfect.
Then Namit goes on to say, as a professional advertising copyright, I know the hypocrisy. I'd like to contribute to the 3 ad campaign. The JPEGs are attached. If you like them, please use them in any platform, perhaps Twitter. You can and should redesign these. I tried my best, but I'm no graphic designer, I'm afraid. As compensation, I'll accept a set of Sabki Dhulai soap set. Namit, your campaign is so cool. Please do tell us what is your address. We will send you a Sabki Dhulai soap set. But let me just tell the audience what your slogans are. So it's a red background in white text. In bold, it's written, I gifted my dad a Newslaundry subscription. Then in black text, it's written, and don't suffer from indigestion anymore. In small text, it's written, dinner in our home is had in front of the TV, on which my dad insists we watch primetime news debates. So I can choose to either sit through the torture or bolt through my dinner, which means torture of another kind in my gut later. But thankfully, a 300 rupee subscription and a few weeks later, news debates are no longer part of dinner time, and I can eat at a healthy speed. In other words, no noise from the rabid journalists and no noise from my stomach either. The other ad is, I gifted my school friend a Newslaundry subscription and cured my hair loss. Because now in our WhatsApp group, instead of saying XYZ community khatre mein hai, he says media khatre mein hai. Instead of saying so and so ne kiya hai to kuch soch ke kiya hoga, he wonders, so and so ne kya soch ke aisa kiya. And now I get to engage in productive discussion with him instead of pulling my hair out. Plus the subscription only costs 300 rupees, which is less than what I was spending on hair care products. And the third ad is, I gifted my uncle a Newslaundry subscription and reduced my dental expenses, and goes on to explain that how he used to grit his teeth when his uncle used to send him WhatsApp forwards. And for rupees 300, he can get rid of those WhatsApp forwards and his dental expenses get saved. So it's a great ad campaign. We shall use it. Namit, thank you so much for it. Now, coming to the earlier mail by Harun, the Ken thing. Did you read it? Have you read it? Jayashree, Anand, Manisha, Raman sir?
I haven't read it. I looked at it, but I didn't finish it.
Which campaign?
It's a comic book
It's
that
a
they've
comic.
come out with,
I saw that.
explaining the FDI rules, basically.
Yes.
Oh, opportune time to also announce the launch of DigiPub.
Yes. In fact, I want to so DigiPub has been launched. 11 news platforms are the founders. I'll just tell you who the 11 are, but the idea is to create a digital news ecosystem that is truly healthy. There are some regulations that government has introduced which are going to really inhibit digital news, which I think is changing the news ecosystem. And legacy media is, of course, watching this happen, if not actively contributing to lobbying against it. I don't want to get into so much of how it's broken because I've done enough talks on that. You can just check out the Scoop Whoop video, which we'll provide a link to below. But I mean, yeah, it's a good comic. I agree. I think it explains things simply. About time someone did do that. But yeah, do read it. Do check it out.
It was a 84-page comic, yes.
But maybe you could explain in Sankshipt what the FDI rules could do to...
No, it's not just about FDI rule. How the advent of newspapers, the media in India. So they and the comic traces. The how did the fund come earlier, and then the FDI in other sectors also. So entertainment sector. So I think it's a very good narrative.
Basically, why the government is so strict about FDIs. I mean, the general thought behind regulation, I will not say is altogether unreasonable, at least not in the earlier years. I think today one will have to revisit the logic. Just like arms, defense products and all. You don't just love foreign countries, because foreign countries should not completely take over the production of things that are imperative to protect the nation. Like telecom is very important. So news also came under that category, that you can't just allow foreign funds to come in and take over. However, today with the internet around, and at that time there was an entry barrier, right? To broadcast a channel, you have to buy a license. You have to buy a license to uplink and downlink, because you're using satellite. You're using sarkari and public resources like bandwidth of satellite and all. But now with the internet, you can't, unless you become China and you block New York Times, you block everyone. You're saying we will block FDI from coming into media. Now, in my view, and I've said this before, I would say a media that is funded by an Ambani is as dangerous or not dangerous as one that is funded by Facebook, or one that is, it is just the question of who has more money. Just like you see that governments completely buy news space. And today, I am not going to say that no matter what this government does, they have India's interest at heart. I don't think they have anyone except their own interest at heart. And that's true for many governments.
Absolutely.
So in this, it is a way for the government to control the narrative. And I think it is extremely damaging. The government is unable to create any jobs. They're nikamma, uneducated people making decisions. And those who are trying to create jobs and doing a pretty good job at it, they are making sure that those people can't do it anymore. And I will say, I know many media that is funded by international money, and they are way more believable than the Arnabs that are funded by Patanjali products and such ads. So, and the government has, in a recent notification, given all media organizations 1 year to come under the regulation, because earlier there was no regulation around digital, although they are claiming that there never was. The regulation was for broadcast and print. They're saying that in 1 year you have to come under 26, and there are many media organizations around the country, including aggregators like InShots and Mind, what's it called? News Hunt or Daily Hunt. It applies to aggregators. Now the question is, does it also apply to YouTube? Because that's also an aggregator. Or Google News. So,
or Twitter.
Oh, Twitter even. So, it just
or
becomes
maybe
so...
like places like Brute, which are just completely on Facebook. They are media companies, but their platform is Facebook. They don't have a website.
So, it just is such an ill thought out, but it's a knee-jerk reaction because they have got so used to controlling the mainstream or legacy news narrative, and they can't do that to digital. They are doing their best to kill that. So for that, if you guys really want to save news, and I'm not joking, I'm not just saying this as a general thing, you're going to have to pay to keep news alive, because the government is going to do everything they can to kill it.
Yes.
And that comic kind of explains that. But enough, I've spoken for too long. I just wanted actually to discuss this in not too much detail, but I want a panel's view on it. We can just start with Jayashree. Recently, this was in the headline also that Manisha said, that the Pope has kind of endorsed same-sex union. But there's a bit of a nuance there. And of course, there was much celebration on social media that what a progressive Pope, which he is. I think he's probably the most progressive Pope the Vatican has ever had or will have in a long time. But this is what he says. This is from the Harvard Gazette. This is in a documentary called Francesco that premiered. And this is what the Pope said. Quote, "What we have to create is a civil union law. That way they are legally covered," unquote, when he was asked about same-sex union. Now, the speculation is the Pope has said it, but that doesn't mean the Vatican will back it.
Yeah.
I just want to know that the panel, have you guys read a bit about it? Have you seen what the international media has to say about it? And do you think this is as big a deal as some are saying for the Pope to say something like this is nothing less than maybe the RSS saying that we should allow Muslims into the top leadership of RSS or women? I don't know. Is it
when
the
they
same league?
expunged that passage about, Muslims having to acknowledge their Hindu ancestry. I think they expunged it from Golwalkar's works or one of
those, yeah.
Yes.
So I think, okay, so this is not the first time he said it. I think a couple of years ago and even before that, Pope Francis has spoken out in favor of civil unions for LGBTQ people. But what I think is most frustrating is that there have been many, the Pope has said it before, there have been many Catholic bishops who've indicated that they would be supportive of same-sex unions before, but nobody is putting this down in writing. And until this happens, you're not actually going to change any doctrine within the Catholic Church. So while it's great that they're speaking about it, it doesn't actually translate to any action. So this is what you said, right? Like, does this will still have to go through the Vatican, this will have to go through the church, and it's not gone anywhere. I think he last said this in 2018, where he indicated that civil unions were, he was okay with them, but what has changed since then? So if every 2 years, if your Pope is going to pop up, indicate that he's okay with something, but not actually do anything about it, I think it's a bit of a waste. It sort of creates a bunch of headlines, and then you'll have another bunch of bishops coming out and saying, oh my God, like, how dare he like rewrite the doctrine of the church? And then the issue sort of dies to the next news cycle.
But there was something about same-sex union in India also, right? Someone in the government or the court said something about...
They filed a petition, asking the government to recognize same-sex unions under the Special Marriage Act, I think. And it's coming up for hearing only in Jan. So whether or not they'll sort of recognize it, I don't know. But yeah, I feel a bit cynical about this entire Pope Francis thing.
Others? Raman sir, Manisha?
Well, I really don't know much about papal politics. So
I think the Pope has earlier also said that, like Jayashree said, he has said that he supports, some legal protection for gay couples, but that doesn't mean he approves of them, or that the church would approve of this. And marriage is essentially between a man and a woman and all that. But I think I still take hope from these statements, and especially when he says that they are children of God and they don't have the right to be miserable and they have a right to have a family. Because I think words like these can create a lot of difference for families where you have really strong, you have parents who are big believers who may make life hell for children. So, I think change is anyway small when it comes to these issues. So any statement that pushes the boundary a little bit and at least acknowledges that, they deserve to live with dignity is meaningful to me.
So, this one news that also it is a big indicator of why some things make news and some don't. Now, the Faridabad murder that Manisha spoke about in the headline, it's a very graphic video of a white car coming, two men getting off, them being some one man getting off, being some dhakka-mukki between him and a girl. And that girl's friend, who's also a girl, tries to protect her. She goes and hides behind. This guy pulls out a gun, shoots that girl. And then the other boy gets out from the car, pulls him in, and they run off, leaving that girl to die on the road. This was probably captured by a CCTV camera. And it became big news. The guy who has shot her apparently wanted her to convert, to marry her. His name is Tawfiq or something, and he's Muslim. And that was also...
That is the allegation of the family, that he wanted to convert her and all that.
The family actually said love jihad. I think her brother said that he wants to perform love jihad on her or something.
But that...
No, he was stalking her for the past 2-3 years. Yeah. In 2018, he had they used to study together. So he gave her and her friends some lift. And but then he kidnapped her. He took her to his house and he insisted that she should marry him. So at that time, the girl, I think, raised alarm or something. When she did not come back home, the parents went to the police and they filed a case. So the girl was recovered and a case of kidnapping was, registered against him.
But it was settled.
But the parents then withdrew that FIR, which I don't know how they can withdraw an FIR. You can't withdraw. Once you file an FIR, it is not up to you to withdraw the FIR. But the reports were saying that there was some settlement. The boys, relatives, they said, please don't do this, and we will ensure that this guy will not trouble her. So he had been sending messages after messages and calls, and this girl was not responding at all. So this is when he came,
I saw, and I think the love jihad angle to me seems really ridiculous. And this is where sometimes you watch news debates and you realize how even BJP spokespersons are better than some of our news anchors. So I was watching Rohit Sardana when he was cornering the Haryana BJP spokesperson ki love jihad ne le li ladki ki jaan. And the spokesperson was at least thinking, how can you say love? How can you even insinuate right now that they were in a relationship or whatever? Because love jihad, the concept of it is that you wear a Hindu, whatever, kalava and tika, and you fool a girl into believing that you're Hindu and you make her fall in love with you. And then, Muslims are supposedly doing this.
Yeah.
So you had Rohit insisting again and again that this is a case of love jihad, and the BJP spokesperson saying that let the investigation go on. And how can you insinuate a relationship right now when there's such a gruesome murder that's happened? and you can't be passing judgments on what the relationship was, whether this was love or whatever.
No, but this,
But I think
this suits to, I mean, those people who want to create, some kind of bogey through love jihad. It suits them because this guy comes from an area called Nu, and Nu is mostly, I mean, dominated
Yeah.
by Muslims. So if you really want to create a big ruckus
Yeah.
or communal,
basically, whenever there's a Muslim involved in a crime, it is bound to now, I think, at least in the Hindi heartland, take that turn, even if it is communal or not. So,
But I think here
But
also it was muddied because her family, who's obviously grieving, because
Yeah.
I mean, it's a terrible crime. I think her brother had given an interview to somebody calling it love jihad as well. And so, I mean, it's very easy now for your entire right-wing ecosystem or Sanghi ecosystem to seize that. Even though, like, yeah, I mean, love jihad itself is a conspiracy theory, but by definition, it means somebody masquerading and fooling a Hindu girl into marrying them. So,
and there being love in the first place.
and they're being, yeah.
I mean, whatever. So yeah, but
Yeah.
no, I
Right.
mean this. Go ahead.
So, Anand, you want to comment on that? I mean, what I wanted to actually also comment on was one of the reasons, you wonder why some stories become big and don't. This had everything. This was a perfect storm. The most important being this video of the murder. Now, hundreds of such murders probably happen every week in our country, but not all of them are caught on camera. The ones that are caught on camera, that is step one. Inevitably, electronic media that can make news go viral, they have something to go with. So that is the number one requirement for something to become headline news or in television. And then it had all the other things that, Manisha and Jayashree spoke about. So I just thought this was a case study, to teach in journalism school, or even in I think there should be classes generally, media literacy classes, of why some stories become big and some don't. And I think this was something that had all the elements of, what is the narrative that goes around.
Just recently in Mumbai, a TV actress was stabbed pretty brutally for rejecting marriage. And there was a terrible story in Tamil Nadu, I think, where an IT professional, I think she was also being stalked and then gruesomely stabbed at a railway station. She was literally hacked by this guy who'd proposed to her. So this rejecting proposals and then acid attacks, some of them are just...
No, but I think additionally the Faridabad story works as a big media story because it has that, it appeals to the Islamophobia, which, I mean, if we're being very honest, is very widespread. So the fact that you have a Muslim villain here, it makes it very easy for people to seize on that story. That's a much better headline, right? Rather than if a Hindu man had killed a Hindu girl, then it's sad, it's shocking, it's on video. But here they're really playing up the fact that he was a Muslim boy. So I would say that's why it's selling so well on.
Yeah, exactly. That's an important. Anand, do you have a view on this?
No, it's a combination of many things. First, the very phrase love jihad is coined in a way that it elicits some ridicule. But actually, in India, if I remember correctly, I first came across this term not from the Hindu community, but the Christian community in Kerala. So Christians were in Kerala were accusing it, if I remember correctly. And in UK there was a documentary on grooming. I think BBC made it on Muslim men grooming young girls and something. So I think in last few years, this is how it came to the wider media narratives or public consciousness somehow. Now, I think it can be divided into two ways because if I see local media reports, there are a lot of. I have always believed that in India, if you have a narrative and you go out to get examples for it, you will get example for everything. So it's such a large country, you get example for everything. Everything can be proved by 4 or 5 cases and say. So some of the Hindi newspapers I read are filled with such stories. So I assume that all of them are not wrong, and some of them would be fake also. In my neighborhood, Patna, where I live, in my neighborhood there was a maid whose girl eloped with a Muslim boy who was of course, faking his name. And she returned, and her experience was not good. There was a barber's daughter also. I can say that some of their statements may be exaggerated, but I don't know. I don't have a mechanism to rule everything out. What I say is that this is not a major trend. The media narrative, for a kind of media narrative, you can say that RW ecosystem, they would exaggerate it to depict it as a major trend. It is not a major trend. But then the counter of it is that these are random incidents. That is has also to be taken with a pinch of salt. I don't believe in the conspiracy theory. It's not a design. But yes, maybe some young men thought that this can be a way of getting a girl or something like that. So, and they share a kind of religious identity that may be some coincidence, but these number of cases are substantial to push a kind of theory. That is what I think.
Sir, in case of print, because you don't need video evidence, that is ever, I mean, now, of course, print depends heavily on your video because everybody's online. So that has become an issue for print. But I'm guessing in the days of print, when you were, whole and soul into it, video evidence had no bearing on whether it would be a headline or not. Is that correct? Or did it?
No. I think if a video exists, definitely. It used to make a big, especially in case of crime. Crime, the video is very rare. Any crime that happens, video is very rare. So if the video exists, even in our times, it will make a huge splash.
Right.
I think though, in this case, I would have preferred that instead of love jihad and all taking precedence, it is really shocking the impunity with which women in India lose their lives simply because they've rejected someone. So I do think if there has to be any discussion around this, and such crime stories, give you the occasion to discuss a problem deep-rootedly, there should be a separate law for this, because in South Asia, I think it's a specific mentality of men to harm someone because they've rejected you. This happens in Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, acid attacks also. It is disgusting for a woman to, for a student, a young girl, imagine what the family is going through, to just lose your life because you said no to someone. I think it should be recorded as a separate crime, and there should be, fast track courts or something to deal with this particular ailment of the South Asian man.
She was 21 and she was preparing for the army. She wanted to join the army.
Yeah, but this mindset that Manisha speaks about, that's so true, because, this sentiment that is expressed in some of Bollywood song, I haven't heard it expressed in any Western music. Like, ki tu mujhe na chahe to koi baat nahi, kisi aur ko chahogi to mushkil hogi. Or, this sentiment has been in various ways in Indian pop culture as well. I mean, if you think about it, and it is deeply problematic and warped.
No,
and especially considering the hero singing it and people are saying he's the hero. So.
And also the fact that our newspapers, even if a man is harassing a woman on the road, we'd call it eve teasing, which is such a polite sort of whitewashed word for something that is actually a horrible thing, and that encourages men to sort of look at it in this sort of genial, paternalistic, it's all in fun, we're all men here. But you're literally harassing a woman on the road. Eve teasing does not quite...
I only understood the concept of eve teasing as where the word comes from in my 20s. When I used to listen to it when I was young, I thought eve matlab evening, because shaam ko ladke ikathe hote hain. I was like, yeah, agar dophar ko phir bhi eve teasing bolta, so phir bhi eve teasing. Later on, I realized this is a reference to Eve as in woman, Eve, Adam, Eve. Oh my God. It really was a late choke for me.
Where did this word come from though? It couldn't be Indian, because Eve is...
It sounds like a very Indian sort of...
Really? But word, Eve,
no?
Would Indians...
I think it is an Indian or maybe South Asian sort of phrase.
Oh, Wikipedia says it's a euphemism used throughout South Asia, which includes, but not limited to, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal. For public sexual harassment. I want to know the history of this, yeah? I'm really curious.
It's like how they also say roadside Romeo, right? For some guy who's heckling women on the road. We'll call him which is a very sweet way to refer to someone. He's just a roadside Romeo.
True. So I have this very interesting email that I'd like to read. This is from Tariqur Rahman, and he's a subscriber. And dude, hats off, yeah. And you'll see why I'm saying this. that he wrote given the circumstances. Dear Newslaundry, it's been a long time since I wrote or been a subscriber. I regret not being a subscriber while I had my reasons. Still, I felt I should have renewed it earlier. Well, Tariq, that you have now, thank you. I write this letter from a flood-affected Hyderabad, sitting on a rooftop with no power for the last 8 days. Yes, it had been 8 days since I saw the power indicator blink, and right now it will feel nothing short of a miracle if it happens. I moved to Hyderabad in 2009 and have seen so many changes in 11 years that I sometimes don't recall the city I fell in love with so many years ago. Hyderabad had become everything I hated about Bangalore: unchecked traffic, countless high-rise apartments killing the ever so small green of the city, government and municipality looking to make bucks from every corner, and lastly, the crowd who will be happier to trade hundreds of trees for a few pubs and breweries. The city has lost its soul while indulging into a rat race to attract billion-dollar corporates who could not care less than the devil. In the last 4 years, I moved from 3 different places in the city due to waterlogging, and yet I ended up at a place which has waterlogged between 4 to 6 feet over the last 6 days. What was the most astonishing part was everywhere I asked, citizens complained to the MLA or councillor, who gave a rat's ass about the issue and requested us to have patience. We might all be debating 24/7 about government inability to handle heavy rainfall, but I can assure myself that despite various talks, nobody will actually be talking about climate change or working to better it. I have seen green pastures near my office being flattened to build IKEA ITC hotels, large office and multi-million-dollar apartments, and all these resulted in nearby lakes flooding after heavy rainfall, while the not-so-fortunate citizens living nearby suffer the wrath. My brother-in-law, who works in government's oceanic department in Hyderabad, has hundreds of stories where delegates of countries wasted hours and money discussing climate change while government officials slept on those reports. Lastly, I believe as citizens, if we don't understand climate change and its impact, the talk of it in news channels or podcast shows won't make a dent. Regards, Tariq. So clearly Hyderabad, the flooding carried on for a while, huh?
But I so agree with him, because I lived in Hyderabad in 2009. And at the time also Hyderabad was on that cusp where they were making it this big IT city, big roads, huge, industries coming in, big shops and all. But yeah, at the time it was still a sort of green, it was a pleasant city. But then on subsequent visits, it's been horrible because they're just tearing up any sort of land to repurpose it as business parks, IT parks. Then you have to build multiplexes for your new population. You're just basically killing a city and you're calling it development. And then we'll claim that it's the new Silicon Valley and engineers will flock here, but they have no city to live in anymore.
Right. Now, I just want to come to the international visitors. Manisha, if you could just tell us what is this 2+2? And Anand, if I could come to you, why so close to the US election have these two been sent here? It is unusual. And of course, I think it was Pompeo who went pretty aggressive on China when he spoke. And is it to woo the Indian American vote, which apparently now, at least by the polls that the US media is reporting, is overwhelmingly to Biden and Kamala Harris? Or is it to show the finger to China? 5 days before the US election, for these two ministerial level people to visit India, is there some special significance? Is there something we should be reading into? Manisha, and who were the people who visited and who did they meet?
So it was the US State Secretary Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper who met with our External Affairs Minister Jayashree and Defense Minister Rajnath Singh. I'm guessing that's why it's called 2+2. Like 2 people from US, 2 people from India have met.
Talks, although Modi also met them, but yeah, the talks were just 2+2.
So the main outcome of the meeting was the signing of the Indo-US Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement for Geospatial Coordination. And it would allow India and the US to access a wide variety of geospatial data from each other, such as detailed maps, nautical, aeronautical charts, and imagery. I'm reading this from a scroll story that I could link to if you guys want to know more about this.
So is this a big deal, Anand? I mean, so close to the election. I mean, what's the rush?
And there can always be an election angle to it. A flexing of, say, American initiative in South Asia. There was a phase in Indo-US engagement when the dehyphenation meant that the terms of engagement would be delinked with how India deals with Pakistan or US deals with Pakistan. Now that dehyphenation has shifted to Indo-China. So what US sees, or Mr. Trump sees, that India is the only challenger of China's hegemony in the region, and that is why China, apart from a lot of minor points, the major resentment of China against India is that India is the only challenger to its hegemony in the region, and the kind of support base that you are talking about among Indo-Americans, or that I think that as you pointed out, Trump has lost a huge chunk of that, and that is not for the Indo-American vote. I think that is for his own say the aggressive foreign policy vote bank, his own vote bank, not the Indo-American chunk of that. So if at all it is related to elections.
So one of the things that also includes tying in with what Anand said about China, and I think that's why you cannot really look at this as an election thing. It's more of their strategic sort of positioning in South Asia and China and Asia. Because one of the things that includes in this pact is that there'll be a cooperation on sharing of high-end satellite images, telephone intercepts, and data exchange on Chinese troops and weapons deployment along the India-China LAC. So there it'll help us.
But we should not read
and main
too
aim
much.
is probably to keep China in check.
But we can't read too much into it when the election is happening. In case that Trump gets replaced by the Democrats, so what is going to happen?
I think it will still continue because China will still be a concern for US irrespective of whoever comes to
No, but I
power.
don't know how aggressive the foreign policy, the US foreign policy is going to be. So
Yeah,
I think
then it may be more inward looking to try to sort out the shit inside than try to see what's happening in the world over. I don't know.
I think it's more important from Indian point also. I mean, India has, I think, very clearly chosen US as the strategic ally, in South Asia. So that is, I think, from the Indian viewpoint, it is important, but we cannot take it seriously.
I was watching this interview on, I think it was on BBC or CNN, where they were talking about the Indian vote. Is it even significant enough to make any dent कि हम अपने आप को ताली बजा के बोलते रहते हैं ये कर देंगे. So they had this one guy who in the past has, I think, been Obama's team and an American of Indian origin, and he runs some. What he said was that, yeah, as an absolute number, it is like it can have very little impact, if any. But I think he mentioned 2 states. I forget which one. Those are like swing states, and the margins are very, very thin. He says these are the only 2 states where it can actually have any impact because they have very thin margins. I don't know if it was Pennsylvania. I think I'm sure our NRI audience will write in and tell me which ones they are.
I think New Jersey should be part of it.
But he said other than these 2 states, it really has no impact anywhere in the rest of the country. I was like, okay.
Yeah, because I think Indian Americans basically vote Democrat. So that has always been the case and is not super significant. So yeah, unless if it was in a swing state, it wouldn't really.
Now, this is one story from your part of the country, which actually we didn't read in the headlines, but I found very disturbing. And I'll again be accused of my favorite pastime of whipping the Sanghis with my ideological prism. But it's a story about a doctor who is an ABVP leader.
Yeah.
And
Shanmugan Subbaiah.
Yes, that's correct. Now, he has been appointed on the board of the AIIMS near Madurai, which is coming up. And why this man is significant is because he had a disagreement or a fight with his neighbor in the building. And there is video of him peeing outside her door. He's urinating there.
Yeah.
And then there's another video of him, he breaks something outside a house. And basically the jhagda of, she asked him to pay for a parking lot which he was using, which belonged to her. Or, building mein jhagde hote rehte hain, which, in Delhi we have a much more dignified way of addressing these by shooting each other. In Chennai, he went and peed in front of her home.
God.
So, but the fact is not, what is significant is not that this is how neighbors resolve issues with each other these days, whether in Delhi or Chennai, but that after this was news, this man has been put on the board of the AIIMS that's coming up near Madurai.
Yeah.
His defense is that the accusation, I've been put here because of my medical excellence.
Yeah.
And the accusation against me is unrelated and insignificant. I don't think harassing your lady neighbor by pissing in front of your house is insignificant. There are countries where you'll be in jail for that. Who appoints this board? Do we know, Jayashree? It's I'm guessing the HRD ministry or?
I think this is the center.
what can the state do about it? Because surely this is going to be seen like rewarding bad behavior. And I believe that is what the ABVP does. I mean, the worse you behave, the bigger your reward.
Yeah, okay. So first off, so he says also that he didn't actually pee in front of that woman's door. So what had happened is that he was using her parking space and she allowed him to. Then she was like, you have to pay me money or rent or whatever to use my parking space. He was like, absolutely, I will not. So he started throwing garbage outside her house, and it all culminated in him urinating at her door, which was caught on camera. And then I think they filed a police complaint, but they were harassed and made to withdraw it. So this part of it is a bit murky. And now he's been appointed. So this also comes at a very bad time for the BJP, because it's on a current sort of soapbox in Tamil Nadu where it's talking about women's rights and how women must be respected, and it's blaming the opposition for using women politics. And yet they've gone and appointed this very clearly a BJP leader, an ABVP leader, as head of the upcoming AIIMS in Madurai. He's claimed that all the allegations against him are totally doctored and like nothing has happened and all. So currently the health minister from the center had appointed him. So this is Harshvardhan.
See what happens, that state government, the health ministry, the union health ministry, they ask for the nominations from the state government. So state government gives those nominations. So normally, these are people who have ideologically, leaning towards the government. So I think this is how it must have happened.
Yeah. So now most of the protest is against the central government, saying how could the central government has done it. So by extension, the ADMK government in the state, because they are allies with the BJP and the NDA. So yeah. So now it's just a lot of like shouting at each other back and forth. But at the end of the day, the man is still, his appointment still stands. So they've not overturned it. They've not changed it. And he's a very senior guy. Like he was the head of oncology of Kilpak Medical College. He was on their board. So even prior to his appointment to AIIMS, he was a very senior person in the industry.
If he has a good legal defense, he can always claim that he was, practicing medicine by kind of urine therapy and doing Patanjali.
It was an Ayush treatment.
Ayush ka kuch kar raha tha. It was a medical exercise I was doing. Nothing, no harassment. But Anand, how do you resolve neighborly spats in Bihar?
Parking lot fight. This seems very benign. Yeah, sorry, Delhi spoilt me, but this fight really seems very benign. Kachra phek diya.
Anand, do you have a view on resolving neighborly spats? What is the ideal way? What do you prescribe in your state?
No. Here, what is that? There is a strategy of brinkmanship, since all sides are very violent. So nobody attacks anybody because the counter attack has to be very violent. So there is a balance of power.
So everyone resolves it peacefully then.
On this, I will say for all my trashing Bengal is the most civilized, in the sense that, I've said this before on Hafta, it is the only place where when we used to be shooting, we used to be going in 2 SUVs with 10 men in it. And out of those 10 men, at least 4 of them were 100 kgs plus. So it was very rare for people to pick fights with us. In Bengal, this guy who was fixing the road in a phata hua banyan and a kacha, he was, the laborer. And like good Delhiites, you were like trying to cut the line by going to the other side of the road and all. He was spraying tar, that melted tar. He saw us coming the wrong way. He just sprayed our car with it without batting an eyelid. And then he abused us in Bengali. We were so taken aback, we just kept driving. But what I noticed is in Bengal, they start shouting at each other very quickly. But it is very rare for it to move from shouting to physical fisticuffs. You just scrape by someone and he'll say whatever, he'll start abusing you, shouting at the top of his voice. He can be an old uncle, he can be young, he can be poor. They don't care what car you're driving. A rickshaw guy will bloody turn around and kick a Mercedes, which you'll never see happen in Delhi. Because here your status determines your aggression. But in Bengal, it never becomes violent. I found that very fascinating. Beautiful.
I think they take out all their violence in politics. Their politics is very violent. So that's the outlet for them to take out their violence. Violent people join politics.
Okay, now I just want to talk about what's happened in France. If you can just tell us about this. I'll just read 2 emails, and Jayashree, when we come out of that, you can just tell us the context and we can get the panel's view on that. This email is from Prerna. Hello, news launderers. Congratulations on the new website. Can't wait for it to come up. Well, it's already up. Please tell us what you think, Prerna. No ill will, but the current website really needs an overhaul. I thoroughly enjoyed Hafta 298. It is nice that you have increased the diversity and the sagacity of the panel with the addition of Jayashree. and that you are
Yay.
giving more discussion time to South-related news. Yay! Thank you, Jayashree. We're getting a lot of good feedback.
Woohoo.
Although I do think you could have focused a bit more on the Jagan versus Justice NV Ramana issue rather than just mentioning it in the passing, because I was looking forward to your opinion on that and the media gag issued by Andhra High Court. Okay, maybe Prerna, Raman sir and Jayashree and Anand probably will be able to tell you. I don't know that much about this case. That way you won't be accused of leaving out any more important information from other regions. So basically we should have more news from the south and the northeast. Please tell Manisha, she's my favorite. Manisha, you're Prerna's favorite in case you were sleeping.
Yay! Good choice. Good choice.
So that is one email, and this email is from Vignesh. Abhinandan asked the listeners to check out NL's previous work in the previous episode. I'd like to inform you that I've tried in the past, and as much as I love the old, soon-to-be updated website, it isn't really suited for the task. NL's Twitter handle does a good job with its NL archive initiative, and it would be nice if things were more accessible. So I'd like to recommend that the NL team compile their favorite pieces, could be on their favorite NL work or other NL pieces that they consider significant, and give us the links in one place, the cheapest and most convenient way. I guess you could,
Interesting.
would be to create an Instagram story highlights of your IG page. That's a great idea, Vignesh. I shall share this with both Meghnad and Chitranshu, and we shall, with the new website, I'm sure we'll have the archive section better and we'll have better listings of it also. And just one more quick email. Shashank says, this is with regard to the latest Hafta. It is stemming from what Manisha said in the past about education. The 12-year student who contacted you is at a very impressionable age. Honestly, an advice like schools are bad, teachers are bad, textbooks are bad is harmful. What Manisha has said many times in the past. I absolutely don't mind Abhinandan's advice on enjoying this phase of your life though. VA are the initials of that young boy who had written to us. VA, I too had a rebellious school time. Our whole class was asked to stand out of our school because we didn't agree with something. But my buddies and I also studied and played hard. My classmates are now holding positions in defense. Some have gone on to become respectable teachers, professors, doctors, musicians, etc. Some of us also played for our city sports teams while we were in school. Our school was truly awesome, even if I didn't agree with everything. Each of us has a finite amount of time here. You want to be able to create maximum impact with your allotted time. The best way to do that is to get a position where you can induce maximum change and shape lots of lives, like being a teacher, a politician, a policymaker, etc. Thus, taking a study seriously while being very conscious of the outside world is a great way to go. VA, it already sounds like you are in a school with a decent infrastructure, more than what most Indians can afford. Take all the good that it has to offer you and be cognizant of what is not so good. Schools and education are very important. We want good, well-informed and well-rounded leaders. Very good advice, Shashank. Shashank, that's good advice.
I agree. I was being irresponsible.
Anarchists like Manisha and
I take
Arvind
back
Kejriwal. They are anarchists.
Kejriwal no more.
But Manisha has taken off where he left.
Only when it comes to schools. But otherwise, I agree. I should be a little more responsible because that person is young. So shouldn't say these things.
So about that case, Raman sir, do you have any more light to share? The Jagan versus that Andhra, is there any more information we can give? Anand, do you have any, Jayashree, to our listeners from the south?
No, nothing more has happened on that front. The Supreme Court hasn't spoken about it. He had written it to the CJI, so he has not responded to it. But what had happened at the bar associations and all, they had condemned, this Jagan's letter to the CJI, but that is it. Nothing more has happened.
Jayashree, anything? Jagan is basically accusing this High Court judge of going at him because he doesn't like him or something, right?
He says there's a nexus. He's also cited, so this Justice Ramana's family members are allegedly involved in some land deal in Amaravati. Now, the thing is, there's a gag order on the media coverage of this case. So we don't really know much about it. But so he cited that I think Ramana's daughters have some involvement in it. But albeit also, so he says there's a nexus. He hasn't specifically said what action he wants, but he just wants to point out that he thinks something is wrong. But my thing is that, anyone who's elevated to the position of the Supreme Court does hold great power and influence over their parent High Court. This is just how the Supreme Court is run. And India's collegium system has judges appointing judges. And more often than not, decisions do come through people like Ramana. So if something was happening in the Andhra Pradesh High Court, it's likely that, or the Telangana High Court, it's likely that Ramana would play a role in it.
No, Justice Ramana had influenced just one basic thing, that all the cases against politicians should be expedited. So that the fast track courts, that's what he wanted, and that even the High Court, on his recommendation, the High Court has done that. So this is what he's opposing. He's saying that why there is a fast track court, because there are 10 charge sheets against Jagan. If we want to know, there are 10 CBI charge sheets against him.
Yeah, but he also says there's a nexus between Justice Ramana and Chandrababu Naidu. I don't know details of what this nexus is. I don't know if he even explained it. But yeah, it was a very vague thing. So, and we don't have any further details since, 2 weeks ago.
Okay, now this is a very important email. Listen closely, Manisha. This wonderful person may have some help to offer you. This is Tanushri. Tanushri writes, this is my second email to you, as your last episode gave me a lot to think about regarding the parallels between science and journalism. I will not be able to delve into the specifics of it due to word limit, but what really got me thinking was the discussion on sources and Abhinandan mentioning that information from sources needs to be corroborated in other ways to present a good story. This is similar to working on a research project where one experiment does not provide sufficient evidence to support a given hypothesis. A good scientific story is one where a hypothesis is rigorously tested from multiple angles to reach firm conclusions. I would also like to know, when journalists are starting out, how do they go about establishing credible sources? Do the motives of sources matter while building a story? We'll come to these questions after this bit. I love watching nuisance, even though Manisha has to pay a heavy price for it. As a neuroscience researcher, if given unlimited time and resources, I would love to have Manisha as an experimental subject to make her sit in an fMRI machine while she watches Republic and observe the different brain regions being activated. I think this would make for a great scientific study. I also suspect that over a period of time, constant exposure to Republic will lead to loss of substantial number of neurons in the brain region. Sorry, that went dark quickly. I hope Manisha is being compensated fairly just for that, and is essential that she is allowed to take vacations more frequently. I love the work you're doing, and listening to NL Hafta keeps me informed of major issues in India. Being in Memphis for the last 6 years, and also provides me a unique perspective. Thank you for that. And finally, does Chetan Bhagat have some dirt on all of you that he keeps getting called on Newslaundry and is defended so vigorously by Abhinandan? If that is the case, I totally get it, and I will not hold it against NL team. Tanushri. Tanushri, first of all...
Yeah, someone messaged me also recently and said that Abhinandan should stop flirting with Chetan Bhagat.
Who said?
So openly.
Who said this?
I was going to say someone and leave it mysteriously, but it was Rajshri.
Okay, so I'm flirting with Chetan.
Okay. It's very embarrassing how you're flirting with him so openly.
Okay, I don't know why I'm flirting with him so openly. All I'll say, Tanushri, is that I have told him that these are not the kind of books that I would read, and I do think they are very basic, but I do think that he has been given a lot of flack by the intellectual elite, or the so-called intellectual elite, which is undeserved, and I maintain that. On other stuff, I won't defend other stuff, but that's why I call it. But these questions are, do the motives of a source matter, and how do you go about establishing credible sources? One thing, sir, I'm sure it has a lot to do with the mentorship, because those who work under you will get access to your sources and stuff, right? How does that work?
Because the motive really, you can easily, if you're speaking to for example, I had gone to a very senior police official, and he had given me the entire story of the Delhi riots. So I knew his motive. I knew that what he's trying to plant. And obviously, I will not buy it. I'll just come back. I will know I know what Delhi police is trying to do. So I will just educate my reporters. Boss, this is what is happening in Delhi police.
But you won't take that as a...
I won't take it as I won't.
But how do you establish sources?
The sources establishment does not happen in 1 day or 2 days. It takes years. If
lots of tea drinking with bureaucrats.
Huh?
I said lots of chai drinking with bureaucrats.
Chai drinking. No. Bureaucrats, in my experience, is that all these IAS officers and IPS officers, they do not give you a story. They are just, you need to be friendly with them just to get a quote from them. So I have a different theory. So I had, and when it comes to a source, like in CBI, you need to nurture, from a constable to the top level official in an important case like 2G scam. So only then you get the true picture. Otherwise, you will not be able to get true picture. So I think it takes years. It takes years, and then also with your experience, you will know that who is planting. Like for example, I know that anything that comes from IB has to be taken with a pinch of salt. Maybe you will not. You have to test it or retest it again and again. So that is how we do it.
But it makes
Yeah.
you wonder, no? Like, I mean, we were always told that you sort of need to be physically present to cultivate sources. They need to have FaceTime with you. They need to know who you are. You need to sort of hang out in a place and try and build that sort of relationship. So it makes you wonder what that would be like building sources in the time of a pandemic. Like when stuff like that, FaceTime is just not.
And people just don't want to do Zoom because you can be recorded or whatever. That doesn't offer that kind of
technology has that
intimacy where you can keep your phone down. And I know in this government, a lot of sources insist to even keep your phone back home when you come for a meeting. I don't do beat reporting, but I have a lot of friends who report on various ministries, and a lot of their sources tell them not to carry their phones.
I can assure you that for sources, you don't need a PIB card. You don't need a Delhi government accreditation card, because sources do not meet in their offices. Okay, the good sources, the credible sources do not meet their own office. I mean, these sources who really want to, like the one story which got me Ramnath Goenka. I mean, I was not meeting them in the office because the CBI director had seen the 1 year of when I broke that story. The CBI director Ranjit Sinha, he checked CCTV footage of the entire CBI building for 1 year.
To see who you had met.
So they were just trying to find out who are these people, DNA, who had come from DNA. They checked all the registers. So the good credible sources do not meet. And after that also I'll say that, as I said, that it takes years. So years means, you will 100% believe these people, but still you need to corroborate. I still feel you need to corroborate. We did corroborate, whatever I got in that case also. So you need to hit the field, and you need to get multiple rechecking these facts through multiple, And
I think most reporters would say that all sources have motives. There is no motiveless source. Yes. Very few are great Samaritans purely driven by public interest. Yes. Most people have motives, and most reporters make themselves aware of that motive so that their story is balanced and they're aware of their sources' biases or sources' motivations, so they can balance it out in how they report it and make sure that they have all sides covered. So, but I would really love to take her up on her suggestion on conducting my brain experiment as I watch Republic. I think it's a fabulous idea, and we should actually do it on a few more people. So it'll really be a fascinating.
I think you and your team.
Yeah, our team, but also maybe like regular news consumers also. We are maybe a little more discerning
that will be a fantastic
than the average
study.
News consumer. But I think it'll be fantastic. We should really do that. I think it'd be one of its kind.
Yeah, I think you should always assume that your source has an ulterior motive. It's the best way to operate. Assume that he's talking to you for a reason, and you figure out what his reason is. But which is also why you don't solely depend on a source, right? Your source tells you something. The point is that you're supposed to investigate it. So once you do that, then you're clearing off whatever bias your source may have, and you're corroborating it with other information.
Anyway, Tanushri, about your question, the one thing that I do like about Chetan, which he has, which a lot of others don't. If you go back a few years, you see on Twitter, I've been very nasty to him. When he said that, what do historians do? And I attacked him that you're uneducated, you're buffoonish. In spite of that, he engages with you, which is a lot more than I can say for very senior quote unquote journalists who I have interacted with in Delhi, who are, seen as wonderful liberal people. You disagree with them or you say something mean to them, they will sulk till their obituary appears on the paper. And till date, many of these people will not talk to me because 8 years ago I had been mean to them. So that I think is something that I find extremely good about Chetan. He can take it in the jaw, laugh it off and move on, which I value in people. And regarding this source, this is another thing that in journalism, a journalist who has a lot of sources is actually very valuable. Just like in banking, if you move from one bank to the other, you bring your clients with you in private banking. You have 5 millionaires who bank with you. Those 5 millionaires will move with you. Which is why in banking, they give that gardening leave for 3 months so that you don't take your clients with you. Same thing happens in sales. So while journalists do not move clients with them, maybe some do, we don't hire those. But the thing they do move is sources. So that is valuable for a reporter. Then this email is from Harish. He says, just want to opine on Abhinandan's query on why the BJP is strong in Karnataka but not in Kerala, though there is strong RSS presence in both states. There are a couple of reasons. One is demography. Kerala has less than 54% Hindus, while Karnataka has 85% Hindu population. The other reason is that Kerala does not have a history of Muslim rule, while Karnataka has had centuries of it, especially in the north of the state. So it's hard to motivate the Hindus of Kerala with historical grievances when none exist. The same lack of historical grievances is also present in Tamil Nadu, which again had minimum Muslim rule. On the other hand, Karnataka and the two Telugu states are ripe for BJP expansion. It's a general pattern in India. Wherever there has been historical Muslim rule, BJP is strong. North, West, and some parts of South. And where there was none, BJP is weak. The Far East, Kerala, Tamil Nadu. Harish Nair. That's very well explained, Harish. Thank you so much. This is why we learn so much more from our subscribers than I'm sure they learn from me. But Jayashree, now tell us about France. What's happened? And it's clearly divided along religious lines, right? Across the world.
Yeah.
France and Erdogan ka jagda.
Mostly it's Islamic countries versus France, no?
Yeah, but so you guys, I think on the last Hafta had discussed how a school teacher was beheaded after showing cartoons of the Prophet. So the thing with France is that it has a very complicated sort of history with Islam. I think it has about 10% of its population is Muslim. And Macron has now called for an Islam of enlightenment, if I'm correct, by which he means a French version of Islam, where it's separated from other Islamist values like separatism and violence and so on. And so, of course, this has got a lot of flack from Muslim countries who are banning goods, Turkey has spoken out, But I think also what is very important is that the way that France has handled its Muslim population almost historically tells a very different story. After Macron's comments recently, they've called, I think, 50 charities which are run by Muslim entities have been called enemies of the French Republic. And these include charities that do extremely good work, but the government has said that they are run on Islamic values of violence and extremism. And historically, France has also been very controversial in its treatment of its population. They're trying to introduce an anti-separatism bill to crack down on radicalism. That's due to be introduced in Parliament in December. It's calling for stricter control on mosques. It has also always said that Muslims need to be very open to the idea of ridicule, but it doesn't have the same standards when it comes to things like anti-Semitism or Zionism or criticism of Israel. That it cracks down on very quickly in France, but criticism of Islam is something that you're sort of expected to take it on the chin. So I think there is a great amount of hypocrisy in how France views this. And I think it's not surprising that it's got the flack that it's getting now. Because for Macron to dub an entire religion as a religion of violence it's pretty shocking. It's another example of the Islamophobia that we're seeing everywhere. Like we were talking about the Faridabad students killing and the response to it. It's pretty much the same thing, where Islam again is the bad guy.
I think there are two things. One is, of course, what Macron said. I don't entirely agree with what Jayashree said. I think their entire rule of not displaying religious symbols is across religions. It's not only for Islam.
Sikhism and all as well.
What you said about the anti-Semitism versus the Islamophobia or the perception of it, I think one big difference is I was just seeing this poll and I'll just try to pull it out when others are weighing in. That while 85% or 95% of the Muslims in France feel that violent reaction to ridicule of the Prophet or Islam, they condemn it, they're against it, which something like Pakistan will be the other way around. Because I remember when that guy who killed Atish's father was showered with petals when he went to court.
Salman Taseer.
But in France, the amount who think that such cartoons should not be made because it's provocative is also 75%.
Hi, I've got those numbers if you want it.
Yeah,
82% said they oppose attacks on blasphemers, but 70% I think thought publication of cartoons is unnecessarily provocative.
Yeah, now that is, I think, the unique bit about, while I do get Islamophobia exists, at the same time, there may be people who say that thou shalt not work on Sabbath or whatever Sunday, but if you open your shop on Sunday, they won't lop your head off. Whereas if you draw the Prophet, they will lop your head off. And the amount of the population that may not support that, but does not support the making of the cartoon either, is way too high in poll after poll conducted, which has been quoted often in American media amongst American Muslims as well. So I do believe there is a lack of critical mass of liberal agendas being pushed in the Islamic space. And we've discussed this before, I think, when Mehraj was on the panel as well.
I was going to say, but wouldn't that exist in other religions as well? I mean, I'm sure if you took a poll and said, oh, how many of us are okay with cartoons that depict Rama doing XYZ, or, that sort of lambast Hindu gods, the same sort of results we'd also see, where 80 or 70% would say, no, we don't support it.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, we'd like to, but I think the fact that it has existed for so long, I'd say there is a critical mass of people who are powerful enough to say that no one's head should be lopped off. I think that is a new thing where people are garlanded for stabbing or,
lynching,
conducting all sorts of horrific communal crime. And I think that is a very political agenda driven kind of, but I think as a general cultural value, I don't think so. I mean, for example, and that's because it's not prescribed anywhere that you cannot draw Ram, or it's not prescribed anywhere. Like the amount of people have fun with Ganesh. I mean, that is a tradition, right? How you can show Ganesh, and like Vinod Dua has a collection of Ganeshas in his house. In fact, showing Durga as a migrant this time. What I'm saying is there is no text that says you can't do this. Whereas there is a text that says you can't do this, and people act on that. I think that distinction, that nuance is important to point out, because any criticism does sometimes get painted as Islamophobia. And you're right, it may have happened with some charities that are doing good work, but that is true for India as well. And you can do both. Like I have interviewed that gentleman from, I think, which Muslim organization was he from? Very sweet man. And I agree. They're doing some great work. But when I asked him that should women compete? No, they should not compete in the Olympics. Should they do this? Their values are very Islamic. And you can be doing great work, just like the RSS does some great work, but their values are extremely problematic. Similarly, there's many Islamic charities that are doing great work, but their values are very problematic. I mean, no one can deny what RSS did for the refugees when they came in from Pakistan to here. But does that mean that everything they say is great? It's not. And I think that's true for a lot of Islamic entities either, and that may be even in France.
Even now, RSS does great work when the floods happen, whether it is Assam or any other place. Even now they do it. But yes, I mean, they ideologically, I mean, there are problems.
Anand, you have a view on this?
And just 2-3 lines. I think it is a kind of situation where I recall Nepal. He says that this kind of classes just result into a clash of jargons, and that Islamophobia versus liberalism, and both actually somehow get caught into their jargons, and but they could be case by case solved. And that was his point, that when you stick to the binaries of jargons, you become captives of jargons and don't look at the case. This also seems to be, I think, fits into that category. There is a case, there was a kind of violence, there was a state response to it, and the state sees a pattern to it and it has responded. Whether it has exceeded its brief, that can be critically analyzed. But also, I think the point about the Indian equivalence of it is not right. It's in you see the kind of imageries of Hindu gods and goddesses on internet or a lot of other things. There are vulgar images being painted, and you go to the interfaith. There are interfaith. Somebody had put interfaith porn sites, and the kind of vulgar images of Hindu gods and goddesses I don't think there has been a violent reaction to that. Yes, there can be hashtags, but hashtags are not equivalent of someone is stabbing someone.
No, but I just meant that in terms of a poll only. If you're polling people who would say they are okay with things being mocked, I would assume that they would vote saying, yeah, I would prefer it if they weren't mocked. That's just about the poll, not about the consequence.
But I think that also operates in a context. For example, and I've written about this in Newslaundry, that, when that entire Charlie Hebdo happened, I saw some of those cartoons. In fact, they had drawn a cartoon after the earthquake in Italy of, Italians as a part of lasagna, because so many people died. And it's not really a mainstream magazine. It's not a magazine like everybody reads. It's a very small out to offend. They've done some very horrible things, and some of those, they weren't funny. But I remember at that time, a conversation started happening on the aesthetics of Charlie Hebdo. Now, 12 people have just been killed. Is that the time, the context of, there is space to discuss the aesthetics of their art or satire. But in the backdrop of someone being killed, I think it's irrelevant what it is. Similarly, whether people agree with it or not, I don't think it can be seen, stripped off the context of someone just been killed for doing that. I think if someone's been killed for doing that, I'll double down. Like, I will not do it in here. And many people on Twitter ask, why don't you? I don't do it because I'm afraid of being beheaded, because I have enough security. I'm afraid of doing it because the government is going to put me in jail. That is the problem in India. And I have said before also, I've been toying with an idea of doing an entire comic strip where you start off with the prophet being shown as nobody, a black blanket that is moving around, and the rise of another ideologue with a white beard. And by the end of the magazine, that invisible character becomes a prophet and the Modi becomes white beard, which you cannot draw. I mean, and the only reason I haven't commissioned it is not because I don't believe, I think money can buy you security. It is the government will come down on you because they need any excuse to go at you.
To me, the France's situation is very complicated and nuanced. And I think a lot of the commentary you hear today is because many people don't understand this French tradition of mockery. And this is going to be one of my suggestions to read also. But Charlie Hebdo, yes, it's the radical left there. And yes, not everyone reads it. And they've offended everyone. Like, they've made fun of the church. They've made fun of all religions. And it is built on a very strong tradition of mockery, which is very distasteful to some. But it's had its roots in Voltaire, literally. And this is very dear to French people and white French people, right? And I have a lot of French friends who, when Charlie Hebdo happened to them, it was like Tagore being assassinated, that equivalent. They really worshipped some of these cartoonists. They loved the magazine. And yes, it's very grotesque, but it's a huge part of their culture. And you really have to understand, how it's shaped and what are the influences. So I think one criticism of the French government in, putting the cartoons on the building or saying that Charlie Hebdo was distasteful or not funny is a little misplaced. You're not really understanding what that culture is all about. But why the France's situation is really interesting now is because it clashes with the society in a way that you have Arab first generation children. And I think more than any other city in Europe, you can really see the discrimination between the Arabs, French Arabs, and white French people. You can literally see in the jobs people do, in the people who pick up garbage from streets or, collect dumpsters. You can literally see a society very divided racially. And you have, when you go to not slums, but what do you call them? You call them banlieue, but suburbs where most of the immigrants stay. They're really different from where the rest of the white people stay. So there's a huge division. And you have a space like Charlie Hebdo, and where most French people feel that, no, it's okay to, if we can mock Christianity and if we can mock Judaism, we can mock Islam in the same way, which is their tradition and it's their culture. But then you have this population that, is already alienated and can feel more alienated because of it. So I think it's super complicated for a government to handle that. And I am sympathetic towards the French view in the sense that they don't want to give up on the years of enlightenment that they've got in terms of being able to be completely grotesque in their criticism of a religion or of a people. It's very dear to them, that form of satire. So it's very difficult to tell them, hey, now why don't you unlearn, what you've learned from centuries and now adapt to these new people. But then you also have to look at the state's role and how they've completely failed at assimilating people to French culture. And there's so many ways of doing that, assimilating Arab immigrants.
So in that sense, Macron advocated for Islam of
He wants Islam of France, and it's very uniquely French to want that, because they are a people who are, more than the US or more than, even any other country. They're very, very proud of their culture. And it is very, in terms of at least religion, I can say that it's a country that really hates religion. I can't speak for the whole country, but at least from the friends that I know, that there's a hatred for religion, which I haven't seen in many other countries. Even atheists mostly are indifferent to people who are religious, or at least okay with people practicing their religion, even if they don't, believe in religion. But France has this tradition of really pushing boundaries and making people really, come out of whatever religious stupor. Maybe it has something to do with, their history. Of course it does, but it's really a clash of two civilizations and two thoughts. So I would say it's very simplistic to say that, to criticize Charlie Hebdo for even the aesthetics of what they do, because it is built on something very dear to them and which has had a long tradition.
Raman sir, do you have a view?
No, I think Manisha has really explained it very well. Yes, the unique aspect is India has also jumped into this. They have criticized Turkey and Pakistan for attacking France on this issue, and Macron on this issue. And perhaps this is for the first time that India is commenting into getting into religious
वो
matters.
से कूद गए, उनको मौका मिल गया ना. Now
Religious
that is the
matters
thing.
of
Here's where
others.
Islamophobia enters. Anand, you were saying something.
No. What I am saying is that people have instinctive responses to it. They just give it a dressing of some intellectual arguments, but basically, what is their temperament to things that matters. And you see, in a lifetime, you will not solve these things that they know that these things are perennial classes. But they have instinctive responses to it, and the philosophical arguments, intellectual arguments are just coverings. Second thing is that having said all that, I am against point proving activities. To prove a point, do something even and just to prove a point, irrespective of what millions of people think. So in that way, my instinctive response, I'm not giving it a philosophical cover, is that these kind of drawings could be avoided.
Right. And the interview I was talking about is, we'll link it. It's an I agree I did with Muhammad Ahmad Saab of the Jamaat-e-Islami Hind, where they spoke in favor of the RSS and how he said there is no such thing as marital rape and what is a woman's role in society. So it's an organization that has done some great work, but it is steeped in one kind of Islamic value, which I find very, very problematic. And and the whole I agree was to call that out. So for those of you who said that I only do I agrees with the Hindu nuts, do have a look. And he's a way more likable person than some of the Hindu nuts I've interviewed. Just FYI. I think it was really sweet, yeah. In fact, I
think Hindu nuts is an extremely problematic phrase. Please revise that. What is Hindu nuts?
It is the equivalent of a Muslim nut.
No. No, I don't approve of that. What is Hindu nuts? I disapprove of Muslim nuts also.
Okay. I approve of
He
both.
generally disapproves of nuts.
But no, when he said now that you can't have that homosexuality should not be allowed, so I said this is what the ratio is in India of men and women, and I said and my religion doesn't allow, and I said on top of that your religion is allowing 1 for 4, so you're reducing this thing even more. Then what will happen to people like me? And then you don't even want people like me to find people like me. Like, let's say that for 50 million leftover men, so maybe they embrace homosexuality. He says, no, I'll find you a girl. Don't worry, beta. He was very sweet, So what I'm saying is, he's a very likable guy, but at a very fundamental level, I think it's deeply problematic the way he thinks. So these are two different things, So just a couple of emails. This one is from Nachiket. He says, I'm writing to you from Paris, a city I call home, and that feels a little besieged on several fronts at the moment. I would like to therefore apologize for the slightly pessimistic tone of this mail. Over the last 2 weeks, I have found it impossible to contain my sense of horror and revulsion at the brutal killing of a French middle school teacher. I remember as a student how deeply one appreciated teachers who tried to connect the often abstract, cookie-cutter contents of the syllabus to the world around us. Mr. Samuel Paty, I'm not sure how you pronounce the name, was doing exactly this when he decided to show those caricatures which sealed his fate. His death comes on the heels of multiple terrorist attacks in this country, whose stated aim was to avenge insults to the Prophet. I wonder what sullies the Prophet's name more, a few misguided cartoons or the spilling of innocent blood in his name. The French state is far from blameless in its hounding of minorities, arrogant racist attitudes, and a pervasive culture of Islamophobia that has only gained ground in this country. At the same time, there is a genuine sense of outrage among many ordinary Muslims at perceived insults to their faith. Blinding ourselves to either fact would be deeply unhelpful and intellectually dishonest. In the end, I fear acts such as these are only going to deepen the divisions within a society that is finding it increasingly hard to maintain its pluralistic character. Greatly appreciate the work you guys are doing at Newslaundry. Keep the haftas coming, Nachiket. I think Nachiket has kind of summed up a French discussion pretty well in less than 300 words. So thanks, Nachiket, for that. And I do believe that social media is going to be like dynamite. When Alfred Nobel invented it, he thought it would have some constructive purpose. Similarly, we thought social media will bring us all closer. I think it has had exactly the opposite impact on society. Well, let's see how it plays out going forward. On that note, Anand, let's have your recommendations.
Basically, I have 2 recommendations. First is in the last time when I came here, I recommended 2 books. I forgot to in that same league of introductory books on Bihar society and politics, contemporary politics, I missed one, and that was Post-Mandal Politics in Bihar by Sanjay Kumar. It's a very informative read on some of the electoral patterns in Bihar. So that is an addition to that. Second is a seamless recommendation of a quite tedious piece that I myself wrote. It's a two-part piece on the evolution of social coalitions in Bihar politics and the various patterns of social alliances in Bihar politics of last 70 years. So my ambitious target is to have at least 4 or 5 people read that. So I myself have obviously read that, and the editor who edited must have read that. So 4 or 5 people should also read that book. So that would be 5, 6, 7, because I doubt that people read those kind of pieces, but I really wanted to write that. Third is a new book by Arunachalam, and that is Preparing for Death. So preparing for death is something which that is a topic I think about most day a day. I think we are buckets with huge holes. The water is coming out and it will be empty someday. So we are gradually.
What a joyful note.
This book is not the kind of book I really wanted to read on death, but still the topic is interesting. I read last night. I finished it, and he has basically worked on the premise that that is the only inevitability, and we are somehow rebelling against it by doing different things, but it will come. And we need to prepare for that. Now, prepare is a problematic word here. I don't think he has put it that well, but still he has given different traditional as well as new approaches towards death. It's not a very high quality work, but at least the topic is fascinating.
Yeah, so I have 2 recommendations, and they are both podcasts, so I feel very proud and smug. So the first one is called Fat So. It's on Suno India. It's about the trials and tribulations, the joys and sorrows of being fat in India. So how any body that doesn't fit into what is perceived as normal or ideal is shamed, it's bullied. And I think this is one of the first times that 2 Indian women speak so frankly about their experiences, how complete strangers come up to them and offer them health advice or paternalistic advice on their weight. So it's a great podcast. Season 2 has just started, so please check it out. My second recommendation is a podcast called 1619. It's by the New York Times. 1619 is when a ship carrying 20 slaved Africans arrived in Virginia. This was followed by 250 years of slavery. So the podcast tracks the brutality of capitalism by tracing it back to the plantations. It tracks the story of Black land ownership, the civil rights movement, so many other things. And it really makes you wonder, like, what kind of scale of podcast they could have done or that could be done on caste in India, something on these lines. So it's a great listen. I do have a third recommendation, but I'm not sure if someone's already recommended this before, but it's Scam 92, the Harshad Mehta story on Sony Live. I thought really it was great. I didn't expect it to be so gripping. So
I agree. What a talent the lead is, Gandhi.
Oh, he's so good.
Wow,
it just blew me away.
He really did.
I need to watch this, man. I haven't watched it. I've heard too many people.
Watched it.
Please share passwords.
Okay, shall do. Raman sir, yours?
Basant is doing some wonderful reports from Bihar, so I would definitely recommend our viewers and readers to read his stories. He is doing some video stories as well. And there's another article I read in Indian Express today. This is about the Bhima Koregaon. Arrest in Bhima Koregaon case frame a transformation in India's polity and police force by Christoph Jefferler. So I think it's beautifully written, and I mean he has given a perspective and has also tried to see that how this urban Naxal, it was coined earlier by Arun Jaitley, and then how the Sangh Parivar and Vivek Agnihotri developed it, and how it's a benchmark, in India's polity. So it's a good article. And the third is, I think I've been watching this Meera Nair's A Suitable Boy.
Boy.
God, I hated it.
Oh, me too, Manisha.
It's
Me
so terrible. You haven't read the book, no?
No.
That's why you liked it.
Yeah.
Anyone who's read the book cannot like it.
Okay, I haven't read the book, but no, it still takes you to a different world, and also the fact that nothing has changed. I mean, even today, the same. So from that angle, I think I liked it.
Yeah, the book is excellent, but I think she's destroyed it
But
completely.
I think as far as the series is concerned, the art design is, I mean, just the production design is outstanding. I think the dialogue is, it's very atpata. No one talks like that. I think that really is grating. It gets to you.
Yeah, it's kind of like a college play, the way they're talking.
Exactly. It's very amateur dramatics.
Also, you can't.
Mother, will you come along with me? Will you, mother? No one talks like that. You know what I mean?
Also, you can't condense that book into 6 episodes, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, she loses out on so much. There's just so much of build-up. And Ishan Khattar as Man, my God, terrible.
Really? I thought he was the best thing in that.
Even I thought he was the best. He seemed
I thought
natural.
other than him and Tabu, everybody else was a failure.
No, but if you've read the book, Man is this really charismatic character. He's, he has so many layers. He seems like a bumbling little boy in that series.
Yeah, but everyone else was so bad that Man was amazing for me.
Also, I think he's got a very likable personality. I think he carried it because he's just so charming. You're right. In the book, Man comes across as a more authoritative figure than him.
Yeah.
But
he's charming in a manly way. I mean, this guy seems like a boy, like a bumbling boy,
Or maybe you were a child when you read that and you're a lady now.
That's also possible. I read it in college, so maybe I was like, wow,
No,
what a
I'm going to
man.
read the book now.
What's a
This
man?
guy's
And now I'm like, oh, what
He's
a
such an
child.
in-control man. So if you read about a man like that, you'll say, kya jhuddu hai, kya this boy didn't grow up.
That's possible. That's very much possible.
Yeah, it's like, when I was younger and I watched First Blood and Rambo and I watched them now and I'm like, dude, I can't believe I like this film.
True. I mean, many of Amitabh Bachchan's movies also. I mean, at that time we really liked, but today you can't watch them.
But some of them, like Diwar and all, I still think are outstanding, man. Some of them.
I like Millie. I mean, I can still.
Oh yeah, that's such
Millie
a
is a
sweet
very
movie.
nice film.
Millie, Abhiman.
Abhiman is also
These.
good. I'd recommend this piece in the Wall Street Journal. Charlie Hebdo's heir to the French tradition of religious mockery. The Slug says the Paris magazine targeted by terrorists was part of a radically irreverent school of secular thought that goes back centuries.
I recommend, there's one podcast and a video also. One is the Planet Money podcast. They've come up with, I think you should listen to the Planet Money podcast. Last week, they've come up with 3 or 4 really good ones. But the one which is who gets to vote in Florida, about voter suppression. Even a country like America where you can just suppress votes and get away with it is so deeply troubling. And I think it's a fantastic listen. And I also would like to recommend I Agree with Muhammad Saab. Do check it out. It was done very many years ago when our website wasn't as popular. Maybe you'll enjoy that. And there are 2 mails which I'll come to next time. We didn't have the time this time. Rant Woman has really gone at NRIs around her. She's in the UK. So Rant Woman, I shall read your email next time. I can't read all of it because it is way too aggressive. I'll tone it down. And Manpreet, you have asked many questions on the panel, which we shall answer next time. So on that note, thank you so much, subscribers, for all your feedback. Do give us more feedback about the new website. Share it with others. Now we have a seamless payment gateway. There are no excuses for not being able to pay because now the failure rate should be close to 0. We do hope you like this and we shall keep bettering our product and soon the app will also be available. And also, can I please request you to contribute to our NL Sena project? Young Basant has been in Bihar for almost 20 days now. He's going to be there for another 10 or 12. And our target of 540,000 is just about halfway there. We're at about 270,000. Reporting takes a lot of money, time, resources, energy, and risk. And you do understand this does cost money. So please contribute to our NL Sena project. You can go to our website at newslaundry.com, click on the subscription button or the Sena button, and do contribute to this project because we need your support because that is the only way news is going to survive. Thank you so much for your support should we get it and do spread the word.
All the News Laundry podcasts are available on Stitcher, iTunes, and any other podcast platform.
Please subscribe to News Laundry. Help us keep news independent. To catch all our podcasts on news, pop culture, current affairs, and sport, visit newslaundry.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.